realized I started Elliot Spitzer, John Edwards, Mark Sanford, Gary Hart, Barney Frank, and I said, wait a second, those are all sexual sins. So I added in Richard Nixon because I knew nobody wanted to have sex with Richard Nixon, and I thought, and then somebody mentioned Bernie Madoff, but they've all messed up, haven't they? Major mistakes, and having to own up to them publicly, which, by the way, if they wouldn't have been caught, they probably wouldn't have owned up to. Let me give you another list. And the reason I added in the names that were not all sexual sins is so that you wouldn't make the connection here between these, because this is just another list. These are Steve DeFever. Ann Colley. Chris Chauvin. Mark Malatz. Brad Garrison. Yeah. Bob Calkins. What's that list? What do they all got in common? Yeah. Do you know that they actually have something in common with the first list too? They all got their past mistakes. Each and every one of us. There's not one of you sitting in this room this morning. And if you think you don't have any past mistakes, pinch yourself. You're dead already. See, the only difference is that first list, they all got exposed publicly. Public exposure. How many of you, Steve, you want to come up here this morning? Do a little public exposure? No, wait, that didn't sound right. No, wow. No, me, Pastor Mark, and we've all made mistakes. We're no different from that first list, other than that first list was so public. And the problem is we have a tendency, see, I don't know about you, I do know about me, when I first read about these guys, I say, oh, a bunch of politicians, dirty, filthy, blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm talking about? And I kind of go there, and then God makes me read this kind of stuff, and it just ticks me off. Just listen to what God says in Romans chapter 2, verses 1 to 3. You therefore have no excuse, you who pass judgment on someone else, for at whatever point you judge the other, you are condemning yourself. Because you who pass judgment do the same things. That bothers me. Except if I remember Jesus said it's thought, word, and deed, and not just actions. Now we know that God's judgment against those who do such things is based on truth. So when you, a mere man, pass judgment on them and yet do the same things, do you think you will escape God's judgment? Thanks, God. It's irritating, isn't it? You just kind of go, man. See, the whole point, folks, and the title of the message today is, we've all made mistakes in the past. Whether they've been publicly exposed or they're privately held inside of a little room inside of ourselves, right? We've all made mistakes. And the question I'd like us to look at today is it possible to turn those past mistakes into present victories? There's a story about the famous British playwright Noel Coward, and as a joke, he sent an anonymous note to 20 of the most famous men in London, and the unsigned note read like this: "We all know what you've done. If I were you, I'd leave town." And they all left. And that was London, not Washington. Now, Noel Coward's sense of humor makes a point. Most people, Washington aside, do have, you do, I do, we've got unresolved guilt issues over stuff that's happened in the past. And the point is that guilt has a tendency to haunt us in every way and at every turn. Now, I know sometimes when things are good, we can take those unresolved things of the past and we kind of stick them in a little room in our psyche someplace, and we lock the door, and we actually do, but we don't even remember them until times get really tough. And when I'm hurting, and when I'm down, and when times are tough, then you know what happens? All those things of the past kind of seep underneath that emotional door and start to get out into my life, and I start to think things that say, you know, I'm just getting what I deserve. I mean, how about you? Is there anything that you're disappointed with yourself about? You got any past mistakes, recent past, far past, that haunt you? Imagine if you got that kind of a note. You know, a little note, sort of like it appears in writing on the fog that's appeared on the mirror in the bathroom after you take a shower, and all of a sudden the writing appears. And it's a note that reminds you of a sin of the past that you thought you'd buried and covered up. You know, that sexual indiscretion, or that misappropriation of funds, or that act of vengeance that we in the church, we're really good, we so carefully veil in diplomatic niceties. That website you just can't resist returning to. That natural inclination to find the fault in others while being oblivious to our own. You see, we've all got some unresolved guilt. Doctors, lawyers, carpenters, academics, politicians, husbands, wives, mothers, fathers, truck drivers. We've all got those things. And those things present for us a present problem, particularly when times are tough. It's like a true story of Sarah Pardee of Connecticut. She married a guy named William Wirt Winchester. Anybody know what he's famous for? Yeah, Winchester rifle. And after he died, she was so guilt-ridden over the number of people that had been killed by the weapon that actually bore her name at that time that, unfortunately for her, she went to a spiritualist, and the spiritualist gave her some advice, and the result was that she believed that as long as there was continuous construction on a house that she was building, she'd be okay. And the result was the Winchester Mystery House. And folks, this mystery house, it's a dwelling. It's got stairs that go nowhere. I mean, it's like dollars with our government. Nowhere. Who knows where that's going? There are rooms with tiny little doors in that house and tiny little cupboards that have nothing in them. And it just goes on and on and on, and the house is a monument to her sense of guilt. What kind of house have you built in here? Because we all share a common need. It is unresolved guilt, that secret shame that walks the corridors of our mind, the memories of regret that haunt our lives. You know, how many of you have something that we wish we could change, but can't in the past? And part of the reason we can't change them, folks, is because we've built those emotional houses with doors that won't open and stuffed it in there, partly to protect ourselves and our own emotional well-being because we can't handle dealing with it, and partly to protect those around us because when it gets out, it's toxic. Wish we could change. Well, you need to know something this morning. You're not alone on that issue. The Apostle Paul, remember him? Saint Paul. I love the fact they call him a saint. The good that I would, that I do not. That which I would not do, that I do. Oh,